Isabella was supposed to get married last year. She was a gypsy, and according to old tradition, her parents had found her a groom. She wasn't supposed to argue with them, she wasn't supposed to resist. Perhaps that's how it would have been, maybe she would have even gladly married the man they chose for her. Gypsies believe that children should know their parents only want the best for them and choose suitors based on strict criteria. But then tell me, where do all these unhappy girls come from? Perhaps Isabella would have agreed to her father's choice. Although it's unlikely. You should have seen this groom. He was 3 times older than Isabella. He had 12 children and already 8 grandchildren. She was only 17. But even that wasn't the issue. Even if her parents had brought the most handsome prince, she still wouldn't have agreed. The problem was that Isabella had already fallen in love. This is why gypsies marry off their daughters so early as possible. In some communities, this even happens at 13. It's because gypsy girls are a bit whimsical, prone to falling in love. That's why they marry them off early, so if they fall in love, it's with their husbands. Isabella managed to avoid getting married at 13. She was lucky, she was her mother's only daughter. Not in the sense that she had no other children, just that she was the only daughter. The rest were boys. So her mother wanted her daughter to live with her for as long as possible. No, this is not good, the father scolded. She needs to be married off. Let her stay with us until she's 100, but who among the gypsies would agree to live with their daughter-in-law's family? And anyway, she's weak. Once she gets married, she'll have to have children. And Isabella is so thin and fragile. What if she dies in childbirth? It may seem that gypsy women are powerless, like Muslim women. But in reality, gypsy women are clever. They only pretend to be helpless. In reality, they run the house and set their own rules. They are not poor and unhappy. They're not even allowed to sit at the same table with men. But who forbade them? Who's the person who would say, women shouldn't be at our table? It's simple. Have you ever been in a company of men? What do they discuss? Oh, right, work, work, and more work. Then football and again work. Any woman would die of boredom there. No one forbade anything. The women themselves decided sitting at the table with men is just plain boring. And then it kind of became a tradition. It's the same with everything. If the mother said Isabella would stay at home, then she would stay at home unless she changed her mind. A lot of water has flowed under the bridge since then. Over time, the girl grew up, became more beautiful, and met Austin. Austin, thank God, was also a gypsy. A young, handsome guy. Isabella confessed to her mother that she was in love. Oh, oh, oh. What have you done? Woe is me, woe. Ashes upon my head, her mother cried. I should have listened to your father and married you off then. Isabella hoped that her mother would understand her and allow her to get engaged to Austin. It was a good thing she hadn't told her father. He would have cut her braid off. But her father wasn't concerned with that at the time. It so happened that Uncle Bavel, who had worked with Isabella's father in the forge, passed away. In Isabella's family, all the men worked with iron and were blacksmiths. When Uncle Bavel died, Isabella's father was left without work, and then his older and younger brothers followed. Bavel's children decided to sell the forge, but her father didn't have enough money to buy it. The new owner brought in his own workers, and the family was left without a livelihood almost overnight. It's time, her father said to his daughter. Now your mother won't make me keep you at home anymore. Father, but I don't want to stay at home. I agree, I want to marry Austin, Isabella declared. "What Austin?" her father asked, surprised. She called her beloved to meet her parents. When her father saw Austin, he didn't even want to talk to him. Austin came alone. He was an orphan, an apprentice to his cousin, and completely poor. For the poor family to accept another one, and only because of the love of a capricious girl? Naturally, neither her mother nor father wanted to hear about any Austin. Her father quickly found a groom for her, the very same widower with 12 children. His main quality in her father's eyes was his wealth. He was very rich, and all his teeth were gold. This was considered an important indicator for gypsies. What could be done? To prevent Isabella from running away and Austin from stealing the bride, her father locked her in the house. Isabella sat alone in her room, thinking about her fate. Why couldn't she decide for herself who to marry? Why couldn't she be rich and independent? If only she had a business, she could leave, marry Austin, and everything would be fine. But how could a young gypsy girl have such thoughts? Gypsy women and business, these concepts don't go together. Isabella's dreams were interrupted by the question, how could she avoid the unwanted wedding? The only way was to make sure the rich widower wouldn't want to marry her. And that could only happen if a gypsy girl lost her innocence. The solution came to her on its own. Isabella managed to escape her confinement by any means necessary. And Austin was waiting for her nearby. Almost on the eve of the wedding, Isabella confessed to him that she could no longer be his bride. Something unimaginable began. Her parents found out the truth. Her father and mother called her names that were painful even to remember. Isabella herself didn't understand what she had done. Now their family was forever shamed. They would never be able to go anywhere to find wives for their sons. Their boys would never marry because no one would want to ally with outcasts. They would die without ever seeing grandchildren. Grief and shame upon the family. How fortunate that they only had one daughter. At the Council of Elders, it was decided that, in order to rid the family of shame and prevent them from being considered outcasts, they must part ways with Isabella. The girl was to leave the camp. From that moment, she became an outcast. Her mother wept bitterly as she said goodbye to her daughter, literally pouring ashes on her head. Isabella was sent off as if she were dead. Such was the law. Isabella left the camp with a light heart. Wasn't this what she had been aiming for? She got what she wanted, freedom. But for some reason, Austin wasn't at the place they had agreed to meet in order to leave together and go wherever their eyes led them. Isabella waited for him for 3 days. She couldn't go back home to ask where Austin was. She was forbidden from appearing in the camp. Violating this law could be far worse than exile. She could be stoned to death. The money she had given to Austin when they planned their escape. Now she was left with nothing. What was she supposed to do? After a few days, she realized that staying in one place was pointless. She could simply die of hunger. Isabella set off on her journey. Now, her home became train stations, bus stations, and streets. Begging became her only way to survive. But Austin never left her thoughts. She oscillated between anger and fear. At first, she was angry, thinking he was a traitor who had been after her money. Then, fear overwhelmed her. What if something had happened to him? What if he couldn't make it to her for some reason? Maybe he had gotten into trouble? But again and again, anger took over. He could have sent someone for her, left a message, or explained himself. Even just saying to her face, "Love is gone, sorry." But the worst part wasn't even that. The worst part was the uncertainty. Her thoughts tormented her. She went around in circles, unable to find peace. Soon, Isabella would face a new challenge. She found out she was pregnant. To say that this was a blow below the belt would be an understatement. She was already wandering from train station to train station, sleeping under the open sky or in cheap shelters, moving from city to city. What was she supposed to do with a child? How was she supposed to live? Where could she raise him? He couldn't sleep on a bench in the park, like she did. He couldn't grow up in such wandering. Deep inside, Isabella began to regret leaving her parents' house. Maybe she should have accepted things, learned to live the way her parents wanted. Pregnancy was making her life even more difficult. Now, she was no longer as mobile as before, unable to quickly escape if someone decided to drive her away. Though her belly sometimes helped her, people tended to pity a pregnant woman. There was no room in her thoughts for the unfulfilled marriage and Austin's betrayal anymore. All of Isabella's attention was focused on the baby she was carrying. Many advised her to give the child up for adoption and not to suffer. But for her, this was unthinkable. She loved her baby. She wanted him or her. Others scared her with warnings about child protection services, claiming they would find her, take the baby, and strip her of all her rights. Nothing good awaited either her or the child. She didn't even know whether she would have a boy or a girl. She wasn't registered at the hospital and hadn't gone for an ultrasound. The future seemed frightening and uncertain. You can imagine what her medical care might have been like, given her lifestyle. But more than anything, she hoped she wouldn't have a daughter. God forbid she would have to wander and beg, repeating the fate of her mother, of herself. However, with a boy, Isabella thought, it might be easier. They were usually born healthier and more resilient. Plus, he would become a protector for her. According to old gypsy customs, the only son or the youngest son was supposed to live with his mother for his entire life. Isabella had no plans to have more children. This meant that if she had a son, he would never leave her. But the one thing she feared more than anything was that someone would take her child away. This was her greatest fear in the world. And she wasn't as afraid of child services as she was of other wanderers, like herself. They could take her baby away from her. After all, it was well known that beggars with children received more alms. And if someone else took her child, she would never see him again, never find him. As her due date approached, Isabella became more and more anxious. One old woman, just like her, understanding what the young gypsy girl was worried about, advised her to go to the city. Not to the most abandoned one, of course, but one where at least a few people live. In such villages, there are many empty houses without owners, there's land to grow something, and, finally, there are people. By helping them, you can at least count on some mutual help and support. There, you'll have a free roof over your head, someone to look after your child, and most importantly, food. And when the baby grows, you'll decide, stay in the village or return to the city. Isabella listened to the old woman and decided to follow her advice. In one of those villages, her son was born. The labor started right on the train. Of course, Isabella was traveling without tickets, running from one car to another until she reached the last one. This is where her labor pains began. The girl was already ready to jump while the train was moving, but fortunately, the train stopped at a small station, and she managed to get off onto the embankment. The train started moving again just as the conductors reached the last carriage. They shook their fists at the girl who had jumped off. So, Isabella found herself in a village whose name she didn't even know. The old abandoned station building had no sign. It was only later that she learned the small town was called Livud. But at that moment, she didn't care. It was in that very building that her son was born. Isabella had to do everything herself, no one could help her. Only the crows sitting on the roof curiously watched through a hole in the ceiling as a new person came into the world. With the baby wrapped in an old petticoat, Isabella headed into the town. There weren't many people around. A few old women were sitting on a bench by the shop, looking at the gypsy with surprise. At first, Isabella thought the shop was closed, but it turned out the old ladies had been waiting for 3 days for the delivery truck to bring supplies. They waited, but the truck still hadn't arrived. "Probably won't come today," said one of the old women. After talking to them, Isabella learned that there were indeed abandoned houses in the village. But they advised her not to live there. "We don't have anything. The shop barely operates, and even that with interruptions. No post office, no hospital, not even a school," sighed one of the women. Isabella thought again, if only I had such a shop. I'd make a real business here. However, right now, business wasn't the priority. She had to think about her child. The girl chose the most abandoned and even crooked house. "Surely no owner will show up here to kick me out," she thought. A small garden, a couple of apple trees, this was all the new house had. It was already too late to plant anything this year, so she'd have to survive the winter somehow. But in the spring, she'd have to take care of the garden, Isabella thought. In the meantime, she'd have to earn money the traditional way, going to the highway and fortune-telling. On the other side of the village, there was a highway, and nearby was a truck stop. It was strange that the village was so run down. On one side, there was a small station, and on the other, a highway. Yet the village seemed frozen in time, as if it were not the 21st century, but the Stone Age. Isabella started going to the truck stop, offering truck drivers a fortune-telling service. Just in case, she took her son with her, so no one would think she was offering something improper. She would wrap the boy in a sheet, tie him to herself with a scarf, and go to earn money. However, in the modern world, it seemed that fortune-telling didn't interest many people. No one wanted to know their future, and many tried not to remember the past at all. "Hey, lady, do you have anything to eat?" asked one of the drivers one day. "The shop here looks like it's been bombed, and I didn't bring anything with me." Isabella just shook her head and shrugged her shoulders. But a week later, a miracle happened. One of the village's old women gave Isabella a chicken. Instead of eating it, the girl roasted it using an old gypsy recipe, divided it in two, and took it to the truck stop. She offered it to the truck drivers. Isabella didn't even expect the huge fuss that a simple chicken would cause among the hungry men. They paid her very generously. With that money, she bought 3 chickens from the same old woman, cooked them, and took them back to the truck stop. The result exceeded all her expectations. This could have been the start of a good business if the old woman hadn't run out of chickens. But Isabella didn't get discouraged. She went to the neighboring village, even though it was quite far, and bought several chickens from the store. "If only we had a store like that in our village," Isabella thought. It was a pity that the store was 15 miles away. With a baby, you can't stay out for long, and you can't carry much. More and more, Isabella thought about her longtime childhood dream of starting her own business. "Oh, if I had my own store. How I would thrive there, what heights I could reach." But all of this remained just a dream and nothing more. Where would she find such an altruist who would give her a store? She couldn't afford to buy one. So, while her dreams of a business were starting to take on more or less definite shape, they still seemed out of reach. Now she clearly understood that she really wanted her own store. After feeding the truck drivers with homemade food again, Isabella was heading back to town. Her thoughts were occupied with plans, how to find time to go and buy products to sell. Suddenly, while crossing the road, she saw a girl, about 2 or maybe 3 years old. A tiny thing. The girl was running toward the road after a ball that had rolled to the hill. Around the corner, a fully loaded truck was speeding toward them. Isabella froze in horror. She understood that the driver couldn't see the child because of the hill, which completely blocked the girl from view. The ball had already rolled onto the road, and the little girl was about to run out there. The driver didn't reduce speed. Most likely, he wouldn't have noticed the crash that was about to happen in a few seconds. Something had to be done. Where had this girl come from? Isabella hadn't seen her in the village. Perhaps she was visiting someone. Looking around, she noticed an expensive foreign car parked near the shop. Probably, the child's parents were there. But why weren't they watching her? Why wasn't anyone doing anything? Through the tinted windows of the car, it was impossible to see if anyone was inside. Meanwhile, a man came out of the store, dressed in expensive clothes and clearly not a local. Seeing the girl running toward the road, he shouted in horror, "Rebecca!" His voice echoed in Isabella's head. She instantly understood that right now, only she could do something to save the little girl. Without thinking about herself or her son, she dropped the empty basket she had been carrying to the highway and ran toward the danger. The truck driver saw the woman running toward the road and began to brake while honking the horn. But stopping such a huge vehicle, speeding at full speed, wasn't easy. However, the slowing down was enough for Isabella to reach the girl, grab her by the collar, and pull her off the road. The loud horn distracted the little girl from the ball. She stopped, crouched in fear, and this may have saved not only her life but also Isabella's. The girl didn't remember how she found the courage to take such a desperate action. There was simply no time to think. Having crossed the road, Isabella fell to the roadside, holding her son in one hand and the girl in the other. Shocked and frightened, the little girl started crying. The truck stopped a little further. The frightened driver jumped out of the cabin and ran to Isabella. He shouted as he approached, "Hey! What kind of irresponsibility is this? What were you thinking?" The child was almost run over. He showered Isabella with harsh words, although he understood that she was the one who had saved the girl. The man from the store also ran up. He hugged his daughter and whispered something to her while she was still crying. Despite her exhaustion and shock, Isabella held her son close and got up from the ground. The man looked at her with gratitude. Thank you so much. I don't even know how to thank you." But Isabella just nodded tiredly and went home. And many unpleasant things fell onto Isabella's head about how terrible a mother she was, and how she had who knows what for eyes instead of her own. Sitting on the roadside, she couldn't believe her eyes. Standing in front of her was Austin. Her Austin. The same Austin she had loved, the father of her son, whom she had given birth to just a couple of months ago, and who had never shown up at the agreed meeting spot when she ran away. Just think, he didn't even recognize her. Isabella had hoped until the last moment that someday either she would find him or he would somehow manage to find her, and they would be together. She still loved him. But he was just yelling at her with obscene words. Had she really changed that much during their time apart? And where did Austin get such a truck? Maybe it wasn't even his, maybe he just worked on it. However, as far as Isabella knew, the Austin she remembered didn't even have a driver's license. A variety of thoughts spun through her mind, a whole bunch of questions without answers. Isabella didn't know how to explain what was happening to herself. The driver, continuing to shout, turned around and went to his truck. And Isabella felt the ground give way beneath her. At that moment, her dreams were crumbling, her life shattered into pieces, spiraling out of control like the very ball that the girl she had saved had chased. In other words, if it hadn't been for Rebecca, Isabella might never have found out that Austin worked on a truck and probably passed by her on the highway several times a week. Hearing the child's cry, the father, almost devastated with grief, got up and ran toward them. Isabella saw the joy in his eyes as he looked at his daughter. There was no doubt this man was the father of the little girl. He examined the child, asked if anything hurt, and, not believing his luck, pressed her tightly to his chest. "Are you hurt?" the man asked Isabella. "No, I don't think so. I'm fine for now," she answered, still glancing at the departing truck. The father of the girl took Isabella by the arm and led her away. He showered her with thanks and didn't know how to express his gratitude. "What can I do for you?" he kept asking. Isabella learned that the man's name was Derek. He was the father of little Rebecca, who had run out onto the road just as Derek had been in the store. Derek turned out to be the owner of that very store. Judging by his car, he was quite wealthy. This wasn't his only store. Derek's main profitable business was in Washington. "How can I thank you for saving my daughter?" Derek kept asking, as Isabella sat down near the store, still recovering. "Do you realize what you've done for me? Rebecca is my only daughter. She's all I have. What do you want as a token of my gratitude?" But Isabella wasn't thinking about anything right now. She was just holding her son close to her, realizing that this boy was now the only thing in her life. Without thinking, she had risked herself so foolishly. She had risked her child's life for a complete stranger. Her father was showering her with gratitude, not even knowing what she wanted, or if she even wanted anything in this life after Austin didn't recognize her. Maybe it would have been better to die under the wheels of his truck. Then, maybe he would have recognized her. That's what she was thinking at that moment, sitting by the store. "I want that store," she suddenly said in a barely audible voice. Isabella herself didn't expect that. It felt like someone else was moving her lips. In that moment, it was as though she could hear her voice from the outside. "What?" "Sorry, I didn't catch that," Derek said. "I want that store," Isabella repeated loudly and then lost consciousness. Maybe from the shock she had experienced, or from the emotional turmoil, or perhaps from everything all at once. When Derek brought her around, he was smiling at her. "Do you really want that store?" he asked. She nodded. "My God," Derek waved his hand. "Take it, I don't need it, it's even a loss for me. You have no idea how much trouble it brings me. Not a penny of profit. You really want this headache?" Isabella nodded. "Well, look at that, I thought you'd asked for money, and here you are asking for the store. For my Rebecca, I'd give you 10 stores. Let's do this, I'll come back in 6 months, and if it's still a mess here, I'll take the store back, close it, and forget about it. Let the locals tear it down for bricks. But if you're at least staying afloat, I'm not talking about profits, I'll help with money. Deal?" Derek extended his hand to Isabella. She shook it and looked into the eyes of the man whose daughter she had just saved. His gaze seemed warm, even tender, like the gaze of someone who is so rich, and judging by his car and clothes, he truly was rich. Sometimes, people like him have a more hardened, prickly look. But Derek looked at Isabella like an older brother or even a father. Her own father had never looked at her like that, with such warmth and tenderness. Derek told the shop assistant that she was now free. If she wanted to work with the new owner, that was fine, but now all salary and inventory issues would be handled by the new owner. Then he signed a power of attorney for Isabella and left. She stood in front of her store and didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Her dream seemed to have come true. What more could she want? She should be jumping for joy. But Isabella still couldn't comprehend the seriousness of what had just happened. It felt like any moment, Derek's car would appear around the corner, he would make her laugh, and take the papers away. But Derek didn't appear. Isabella decided not to procrastinate. She began studying the papers and documents, the cash books. It was so difficult, especially since no one had filled anything out properly. A revision was needed, and she had to find a way to get new goods. Isabella had no idea how to do any of this or where to get them. According to the salesperson, Derek used to bring the goods according to a list. But where he got them from, Isabella had no clue. He probably had wholesale suppliers since this wasn't the only store he owned. Her head was spinning. Every evening, Isabella went to bed after midnight, and the number of questions only grew, never diminished. The next morning, Isabella woke up with a brilliant idea. She sent out merchandisers and other distributors of goods to spread the word in the village and surrounding areas that anyone who wanted could bring their goods to the store. Some people might have surplus products, like vegetables or apples. Others could pick berries and mushrooms in the forest. Fishing and hunting enthusiasts could also sell their excess. For industrial goods, elderly women could sell their knitted and embroidered items. Isabella accepted everything on consignment. Her store turned into a huge village thrift shop. Naturally, all items were accepted with a list, and not without benefit to the store. Those wishing to sell set their price, and Isabella sold them for a bit more, at a markup. Of course, this was understood by everyone, but she patiently explained to each person that these were the trading rules, and soon business started booming. It was profitable for everyone to bring greens, eggs, and milk to the store. Sales were brisk, and people from neighboring villages and towns began visiting the unusual store. At first, just to have a look, and later, to bring something of their own. The store was visible from the highway. Isabella set up several tables and continued feeding the truck drivers. Now, she no longer had to run with a basket between the cars. The drivers started coming to the store on their own, knowing where the tables were. Even from a distance. Isabella was happy. She had realized her dream. Now she knew the most important thing: dreaming, believing, and not losing hope. Her son was right there. Sometimes one of the village grandmothers helped her keep an eye on the boy. She had gotten used to more trucks arriving at the store. Whoever had arrived, she went on with her business. One time, while sorting apples, Isabella heard the sound of a truck pulling up. "I thought I heard you. I thought it was you," a familiar voice said. Isabella looked up and froze. There was Austin again, just like that time when a tragedy almost happened. Apples fell from her hands and rolled across the floor. "Have I changed that much?" she asked. "I don't know, maybe I've changed," said Austin. How long she had dreamed of this meeting, thinking of all the things she would say to him, all the questions she would ask. But here they were, standing face to face, and all she could hear in her ears were the bad words he had used to insult her when he almost ran over her child. It was clear that he had been under stress back then, just like her, but something had snapped in her at that moment. She had expected something completely different from Austin, both then and now. "I see you've settled in well," Austin said, looking around the store. "I tried," Isabella replied. How much she wanted to throw herself into his arms, to tell him about her troubles, sorrows, and wanderings, and how she got this store only thanks to that past meeting with him. The baby in the stroller began crying. She picked him up and started rocking him. "I see you've got a baby now," Austin said in a somewhat silly tone. Isabella really wanted to tell him that this was his child too, but in that moment, it felt like someone else had opened her mouth and said, "Looks like you got yourself a car. Is it yours, or do you work with it?" she asked. "It's mine," Austin said, "and I'm glad to hear you're happy. Sorry about what happened back then." "I didn't see the baby," he added. "I know," Isabella replied. Austin turned around and left the store. The car's engine roared, and he drove off. Isabella wanted to run out into the street, chase after him, but she was holding the baby in her arms and wondering, does she love him now? Now, she loves something completely different. She loves her son, her well-being, and the happiness she wouldn't risk for anything. She loves her store, her work, her neighbors. She stood there, not understanding whether she was happy to have seen Austin or upset that he left without asking too many questions. Most likely, he hadn't even considered that the child could be his son. God knows what he's making up in his head now, Isabella thought, but she didn't want to convince herself otherwise. She pushed out of her mind the thought of how a poor gypsy could have money in less than a year to buy such a car, and even start a business with it. Maybe he met a rich person who gave him the car, just like someone gave her the store. But that seemed unlikely. Such coincidences don't happen. However, for some reason, Isabella didn't dare ask him directly how he had managed to rise so quickly. Probably, Austin didn't dare ask her about the baby or the store either. Isabella felt that they were now completely strangers to each other. She no longer waited for him as she had before, nor dreamed of their meeting. Half a year had passed so quietly, like snow falling on her head. It had passed so unexpectedly, she hadn't even realized it had been 6 months, she had been so caught up in the store's affairs. When Derek saw all of this, he was not just stunned, he was overwhelmed. How did she manage to turn that mess into something like this? In essence, even the not-so-educated gypsy girl Isabella, like many gypsy girls, only attended school until the 6th grade. And once she became a young woman, her father and brothers no longer allowed her to go. By gypsy standards, Isabella was already a bride ready for marriage, and it was not proper for her to go to public places. Because of this tradition, many quite intelligent gypsy girls don't receive a proper education. It's a shame, really. However, Isabella could read and count. That was enough for her to realize her dream. "So, are you going to give your store back now?" Isabella asked Derek. "Honestly, I had plans just like that." "I thought you had already run off by now," he said. "As you can see, no. What are we going to do now?" "You promised that if the store was thriving, you'd help me with money," Isabella reminded him. "There's just one problem. I understand you didn't know, but still, what exactly are you doing here? It's not entirely legal. The sanitary inspection won't pat me on the back." Isabella decided to change the subject and asked about his daughter. She was very afraid of all these government agencies, from social services and guardianship to sanitary and epidemiological stations and other regulatory bodies. To be honest, she herself was almost expecting that someone would show up at her door any day now. But since the owner of the store was here now, he could deal with it himself. Derek stopped by some familiar faces and decided to spend some time in the village to observe the situation before deciding what to do with the store. Isabella was secretly happy with his decision, though she didn't really understand why. Still, she enjoyed looking into his soft, warm eyes. Derek told her about his daughter. Rebecca had long forgotten about the incident. She hadn't really understood what had happened back then. But she clearly remembered the beautiful aunt who, like an angel with wings, had saved her. She kept begging. That's how she spoke of her aunt. The little girl didn't know her name. "By the way," the gypsy woman asked, How did Rebecca's mother react to that incident? Derek lowered his gaze and said that Rebecca's mother probably reacted very badly, and if she were alive, she would have killed him for leaving the child by the roadside unattended. She had died during childbirth, and she never saw how, Derek explained. He continued, she reached out to every woman she met, seeing her mother in each of them. It was hard for him with his daughter in that regard. He was a businessman and was simply forced to use nannies, but it always ended the same way. Each nanny Rebecca started calling Mom, and each nanny would try to get close to his wife for her wealth. He wished he could find a real mother for Rebecca. Since they had such an open conversation, Isabella told her real story and explained that the truck driver, from which she miraculously saved Rebecca, was her lover, now probably her ex-lover. One thing Isabella couldn't understand was how he managed to get rich so quickly and buy a truck. Derek promised to look into this matter and find out everything she wanted to know about Austin, as well as his parents and brothers. Isabella was still worried about them, wondering how they were doing. She agreed. Derek left and promised to return next time with Rebecca, as Isabella had requested. The fate of the store remained uncertain. As soon as Derek left, like an unwelcome guest, Austin showed up. He was now openly following Isabella and didn't hesitate to insult her, calling her every name under the sun. Now everything was clear to him. He understood where she got the store and who the father of her child was. So, this is how she had loved him, and how quickly she had forgotten him. He wouldn't even let Isabella get a word in, shouting and swearing, scaring the child. And to top it all off, he destroyed half the store, supposedly as revenge for her betrayal. To say that Isabella was shocked would be an understatement. She had never felt such horror and fear, not even when they were going to marry her off to an old man with 12 children. Now she knew for sure that she didn't love Austin, at least not the Austin she saw before her now. If she ever loved him, it was only that past version, the poor but noble young man. And to make matters worse, Austin promised to return and leave not a stone standing. Isabella thought she might not wait for Derek and just run away somewhere else. She desperately wanted him to never know where she and her son were. Thank God, Derek returned after 3 days. If he had delayed even one more day, he would have missed her. She threw herself into his arms as though he were her real father, her husband, her beloved. Derek had truly been her savior for the second time. When he saw what Austin had done to the store, he didn't hesitate. He simply called his security service and gave them the car's license number. Now, Derek promised, this man won't bother you again. He's a bad person, and you shouldn't have expected anything good from him. It turned out that in these 3 days, Derek had managed to find out everything about Isabella's family and about Austin. When she ran away, her father intercepted Austin and offered him a ransom in exchange for leaving Isabella alone. Although the family was without money, which was why they were going to marry her off to the old man after her escape, the situation was resolved very simply. Instead of marrying Isabella, the old man offered to marry his daughter off to one of Isabella's brothers. She would get the same rich and generous dowry, even though she wasn't very beautiful, and no one was planning to marry her for money. Isabella's brother agreed to marry her, and to prove to Isabella that she had made the wrong choice in life, they decided to test Austin's sincerity. They offered him a car, and they didn't go wrong with their choice. The poor but greedy young man chose the gift over love. That's why Austin didn't show up at the designated place and left her to fate. Isabella listened to Derek, and not only couldn't she believe her ears, but she also couldn't understand why fate was so cruel to her. Why couldn't she have normal, simple happiness? Derek looked her in the eyes and said, "Maybe all these trials, both for you and for me, were sent by fate so that we would meet each other. If you had taken the car back then, You would have run away with him, and you would have never known what a bad person he really was, and you would have never met me. Derek had fallen in love with Isabella from the very first moment he saw her, when she was standing by the side of the road with her daughter in her arms. He just didn't know how to approach her, how to explain it to his daughter. It took him a long time to realize and open up to them. Isabella had to close the store in the village after Austin destroyed it. Derek suggested that Isabella come with him to Washington. He had more stores that needed a fresh perspective. He offered Isabella the chance to become his partner not only in business but in life as well. That's how things go sometimes. As they say, through hardships to the stars. You shouldn't give up on your dream. You have to follow your dream, like Isabella did, and then it will find you and open its doors. If you keep dreaming, despite everything, despite the hardships, betrayals, and setbacks, and if you believe, you can make any wish come true. Isabella will be a good example of this. She was forced to hit rock bottom, begging for money and sleeping on the street. But in the end, she became a businesswoman, a beloved and loving wife, and a wonderful mother to her son and to Rebecca.